You want to make some picks on your favorite sports? Check out Underdog's Fantasy Pick'em game, where you can pick higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players and can win up to 325 times your entry by using code Niners when you sign up, and you'll get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick.
From the alley-oops at Keysar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft, but really what we're doing is answering your questions. People have been writing in, leaving me questions, whether that's in the comment section or emails or whatever it is. And I want to get to some of those questions, and a lot of them are pertaining to the 2025 NFL draft. And of course, I've been taking a slow process on getting to it because there's so much more that happens before the draft. And right now is a good opportunity to talk a little bit of draft with the Senior Bowl and all the Senior Bowl practices that have been going on. Everyone's been talking about the risers, who's stepping up in those individual drills and who's making a name for themselves in Mobile, Alabama right now. And I think it's definitely a hotbed of conversation when it comes to the draft. And the fun part is the draft, you have a couple of stages here where you're going to go Senior Bowl and then you're going to go NFL Combine. And during those time periods, the draft is going to be king. Then shortly after the Combine, we're going to get into free agency. And free agency is going to reign before we turn right back to the draft, because now we know what the needs of are the football teams as they've figured out their holes in their roster with free agency, and now they can add to it in the draft. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode, getting into your questions. I'd like to say, if you have questions, you can always leave them in the comment section. I'll do my best to get to them. Maybe I could do more videos like this where I answer your questions. Of course, I do like to go live. With my current schedule, it's been a little bit more difficult to go live recently. And some of the normal people I go live with, it just hasn't worked out. It's the off season. That's the way things go. But we're still going to be doing that. So you can always ask them on live episodes as well. And if you want more draft content, all you have to do is click the link in the description and head on over to 49ers Cutback Patreon. And you can see I'm doing breakdowns of individual players. I've been working on the offensive line that could be available at pick 11 and just kind of getting into my breakdown of those players and what exactly I like about them. So I haven't got so locked down into tell you like, oh yeah, I think the 49ers are going to select these guys or those guys. We're just getting really involved in what the draft is and who the players are. And at some point, we'll really start to reel it in on maybe the guys that the 49ers are interested in, their skill set matches their availability in the draft, and then you get a player that's going to fit. So that's what we're going to be working towards, but I'd like to say that's available on Patreon if you'd like to get more draft coverage. That's where a lot of the draft coverage is going to be. There's still going to be some here on my audio platforms and on YouTube, but just so you know, that's where it's going to be. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you are going to bet with Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make game day action count a little bit more. Bet Online, the game starts here. So my first question is going to be about the draft, and I thought this was a excellent question that came through from a Reckless. Reckless Ninja said, is there an Earl Thomas type of player in free agency or the draft? I feel that if we're running the Legion of Boom defense, couldn't we get an eraser safety? I thought was a key to that type of defense. And Earl Thomas was just a phenomenal player. I think everyone understands what he meant to the Legion of Boom. And part of the reason that he was so great is because he was a true center field safety that could also deliver a blow and play inside the box, blitz the quarterback. Like, he could do it all. Finding those guys is very difficult. And I don't think there's an Earl Thomas a player available in free agency. I think the closest thing you're probably going to get is Justin Reed. And Justin Reed's a good player, but I don't think he's Earl Thomas. I do think he's a significant upgrade over most people's safety rooms. But are you going to want to pay that type of money? I think that's also something that has to play into it, is the amount of money you're going to spend on a guy like Justin Reed. That's going to prevent you from having Dre Greenlaw and prevent you from maybe going out and getting a center like Drew Dahlman or bringing back Talanoa Hufanga. And of course, if you're replacing Hufanga, right, it's an upgrade because Justin Reed's been so good. But when you're talking about losing out at other positions, I just don't think it's there. Now, I don't know if these guys are going to be Earl Thomas, because you're looking at it from a perspective of, we know what Earl Thomas was for Seattle. But we just have to look at traits, abilities, guys who have the potential to be a big-time safety, a guy that can cover the deep third, can also help you in the run game. And there are some names that I like in this draft so far. And like I said, I'm just getting into my draft work, and I haven't got into a lot of the middle round guys. I've looked around. People have told me to look at certain guys, and I have. But I do detailed work on players that are going to be around for certain picks for the 49ers. And so I haven't got into safeties real deep, but your question definitely goes around the top safeties. And there are some guys that I really like. Number one that I want to bring up, and a player that could go in the first round, which means there are going to be teams that believe he has that Earl Thomas capabilities, and that's Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. And he is a do-it-all player. This guy is fantastic. He's got a lot of ability. I'm definitely a huge fan of Malachi Starks and, what he could bring to a football team, and especially the 49ers football team. I think it might be a little rich. And this is one of the things we're going to be talking about a lot as we approach the draft, is the 49ers are sitting at 11. What is too expensive for the San Francisco 49ers when it comes to certain positions? We've never seen the 49ers go with a safety, really high in the draft. I mean, Trent Baalke went with Jimmy Ward, but they saw him as a cornerback, so that's not really the same thing. Besides that, it's probably Jair Brown, who was a third-round pick. So they don't invest the first two rounds usually with safety. So this would be a change in direction if they decided to do that. And so you've got Malachi Starks as a possible option for the 49ers. And Malachi Starks, it fits the bill from what the 49ers normally like. 6'1", 205. He's projected to run in the 4.3s. So you've got the speed. If you have that speed, you can cover the deep third. There's a lot of things to like about him. And so I think in that category, this is a guy that you can kind of put all over the field. He's a guy that is not just a deep third safety. He's not just a guy that can play in the box, but you could line him in the nickel, and he could play against slot receivers in the NFL. He's done a pretty good job with that. So he's definitely somebody that could be that talented and have the potential to really fit into that role of being a do-it-all safety and a deep third safety, and is what the 49ers definitely need. But he's also a guy that triggers quickly and helps when it comes to run fit. So to me, I think that he would be a fantastic pick for the 49ers. The problem is that going to be the investment you want to make at 11? Do you want to take a safety? And your thought behind it was right? The Earl Thomas type player that kind of helped everything for the Legion of Boom. And if you feel that Malachi Starks could be that guy, then 100% you pull the trigger and you bring him in. So I think that Malachi Starks is an option. I just think that he's more of an option if the 49ers decide to trade back from 11 and they trade back to, say, 16, 17, and all of a sudden you get there and Malachi Starks is there. But even then, they would be paying more for a position that I'm not sure they're normally ready to pay for. So what about a couple of guys that could be available at 43? One of these guys I think could end up being in the first round is Nick Emenwari out of South Carolina. And I got to admit, watching Emenwari, I know he's a lot of people's number one safety in this draft, because when you're talking about a ceiling, this guy might not have no ceiling. This guy's sky is the limit. He is absolutely just a tremendous player to watch. And I haven't decided yet if he's a first round guy because of the way that the 49ers value players. I try to keep everything through that prism, but Nick Emenwari is 6'3", 227 pounds. The dude is projected to run in the 4.3s. If he runs in the 4.3s, he will be a first round pick. If he runs slower, 4.5, he might slip into the second and be available for the 49ers at 43. I do believe the 49ers would love to get a player like this. This is the kind of player you talk about, a guy that can move, a guy that's quick. Now he has his weaknesses as well. When you have a 6'3" body type, sometimes it's harder to get in and out of your breaks, to change direction on a dime. So those are things that he's got to work at. But you're talking about a guy that can cover tight ends. He matches up well physically with them. He was a ball hawk. He had 4 interceptions this season. And he's just going to probably measure out of, this world with the amount of ability that he's going to have. So I'm a huge fan of him, his freakish size, strength, speed. This is a difference maker, right? Right now, you look at Malik Mustafa, a little undersized. This dude is the freak athlete. He stands out in a secondary. And so if he tests like I think he's going to test, he's probably going to go in the first round, and the 49ers wouldn't have an option to get him unless they wanted to trade up. And so that might make it a little difficult. That's what we're talking about, is evaluation-wise, these guys fit nice for the 49ers. The problem is you also have to think about positional awareness as well, what the 49ers normally pay on. It's not normally safety. And you might be sitting here saying, you know what? But the 49ers need to change that mentality. And you could be right. They might need to change that mentality for the right guy. Now, another guy available is Jahdae Barron out of Texas. And Jahdae Barron is a very talented guy, but it's a guy that's, kind of suffered some injuries. So you could go there. But I'm going to go with another guy from Texas, and that's Andrew Makuba. And is he the eraser like Earl Thomas? No. But you know what Andrew Makuba is? Fast. He flies around. He can cover the deep third. He had 5 interceptions. Just really, really good job. He had, 5 pass defenses this year, 6 pass defenses this year. But, the guy just makes plays. He closed out Arizona State with an interception in the Bowls. He was originally at Clemson. I really enjoyed his film. And in fact, he was the first safety that I saw. He had come across, and I kind of watched him. And so I've been a fan of his so far. Emenwari has been kind of the one that's been coming on lately. But, this guy, when you look at some of the comparisons, according to some of the different programs, they were talking about Javon Holland and Renardo Green, and the 49ers love Renardo Green. So Renardo Green, this just shows you what they believe Makuba can do as far as the just tremendous speed, athleticism, and the fact that he can be so versatile and play a bunch of different positions in the secondary, including lining up and playing in the slot. And the 3 guys that we really talked about are guys that have the speed and can line up in the slot and have a lot of versatility at safety. They can play in the box. And, when you're talking about this guy, Makuba, you're going to give up a little bit of size, but he still is a good tackler inside the box. So those are the 3 guys I could see the 49ers potentially, going with if they went to the draft. In free agency, we've brought up some guys. I don't think it's going to be a guy that is an eraser. I don't think there's a guy that they're going to bring in at a big time money deal. So I think it will be addressed in the draft. Malachi Starks and Nick Emenwari are probably going to be first round. Starks probably, as of right now, middle of the first round. Emenwari probably towards the end of the first round, but that could definitely change. And then Andrew Makuba, I think, would be available for the 49ers at 43. I don't think he would make it to 75. So it could be what they normally do. They draft their first 2 positions, and then they go ahead and they trade up in the 3rd round. Maybe they go from 75 to 60 to get Andrew Makuba, get that speed guy. But once he puts that 4.3 on film at the combine, it might be tough. Now, Joseph had a question. He said, what about going to 3 safeties? And this has been sparked. The conversation's been going around for a while. And this is a question I probably get the most is you see Dre Greenlaw potentially moving on, or you have Dre Greenlaw, but why don't we just go 3 safeties? And, right now the problem would be you don't have 3 safeties you like that much to put 3 safeties on the field. But there is a real disadvantage for the safety inside the box. You do see safeties come in the box, and they're usually the fourth defender, and then they got to come in and play the run. And most of them do pretty good. Talanoa is pretty good at it. Malik Mustafa is pretty good at it. When you're talking about 49ers safeties, that's an area that they're usually pretty good. Now, here is the issue with it, is normally a safety usually goes about 6 foot to 6'2", about 210, 215 pounds. A starting NFL linebacker usually goes anywhere from 6'1", 6'2", but usually the low-end weight guys are 230, 235. So you're talking about a 25, 20-pound difference between the two, which might not seem like a lot. But when you're going against offensive linemen that are 6'5", 300-plus pounds, it's a problem. You give up a lot of size, a lot of weight. And with that 20 to 25 pounds, that's a lot of strength. So when you're getting moved, you got to shed blocks. Now you're relying completely on quickness to be able to get around those guys. And it works from time to time. But even tight ends have a size advantage over safeties. So if you're going to play a third safety, be prepared for the opposing team to line up and run you over. Because if you're playing three safeties, it usually means you're either in a big nickel, which teams would love to run against, or you're going against a base set. And Seattle did it against the 49ers a little bit. There was another team that did it some this year as well against the 49ers. And the 49ers went to their 21 and 12 personnel, loaded up, and ran over it. So it does weaken you when it comes to run defense. And I know a lot of people don't see the big difference between a linebacker and safety, but there is a big difference. A safety is not taught to be able to shed blocks, read the run lanes, get downhill in their windows and make tackles the way that a linebacker is. There's a lot more that a safety does first. They're pass first, run second, and so their responsibilities are different. So you're talking about two different players entirely, and I know a lot of people like to blur the gaps, and sometimes it works, especially if you're, like I said, a heavy nickel or a big nickel situation. Then yeah, three safeties. I'm not against that. I actually kind of called for that a little bit this season with Deshaun Gibson, because I thought Gibson was a pretty good matchup in nickel packages for some tight ends. And we've seen him do it a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of creativity this year with the defense. So I think that's one of the things to remember when you're talking about three safeties is the idea works on paper, but that safety would have to be a lot bigger. I mean, are we going to talk about a safety like Emin Wari that's almost 230 pounds? Well, then he's not giving up a lot of size. The question is, does he have the skill set to be able to shed blocks? It's hard to get off of offensive linemen and tight ends blocks and be able to get into your run lane and make the play. If you don't, you're going to open huge gaps. So I'm not for the 49ers going to a three safety look in base sets and base downs. I would be okay with it if they went to it in some nickel situations, especially if a team was trying to employ, a bigger tight end that is more of a slot receiver. I think that would make some sense for the 49ers. You can cover but still stop the run. But I think it has to be more scheme specific and personnel specific. So I think that's a little bit tougher. Now, I had two questions about a 49ers undrafted free agent from last year. And I think this one has been asked a lot as well. Drake Nugent. And, the first I got this one, it said, what is the story about Drake Nugent? And then I got from my guy Lou, he said, Ant, why did we give Nugent a chance to show what he has at center? We know what Brendel is, and he's mediocre at best. At least we have Zakel, and let him play guard and center. He did good as far as I could tell. So one of the things that got brought up a lot last season was Drake Nugent. And I went out to training camp last year, and of course I was going to watch the offensive line. It's always something that's very interesting. And there was a little bit of a shuffle because Spencer Burford got hurt, and that allowed Dominic Puni to step in. John Feliciano wasn't practicing, which meant we got to see a few people. We got to see a lot of Jake Brendel when he was healthy. We got to see a lot of Nick Zakel. We got to see a lot of Ben Barch. And we got to see some Drake Nugent. Now, Drake Nugent had some things that made him go undrafted. And a lot of people see what he did on the national championship team in Michigan, and they're like, man, let's get that guy playing center. I will say that the difference between collegiate athletics and the NFL are pretty stark because these are the best of the best individuals that are coming in. And what we saw in training camp and even in the preseason was a little bit of a slow burn when it came to Drake Nugent. He was struggling in some areas, and there were some things that they were working on. So when he did not make the 49ers active 53-man roster, was not surprised. Now, I love the fact they kept him on the practice squad because I think that he's got a lot of potential, but we got to see what he could end up being. But he was so far down the depth chart that the San Francisco 49ers did not intend on playing him. And you're going into games and you're playing, Brock Purdy, and I know that they played Josh Dobbs in the last game, and people were like, hey, why don't you just let him play? Well, I think that they believe he wasn't ready. If they believe for a second, Chris Foerster, because Chris Foerster and Drake Nugent's dad go way back, if he thought for a second that Drake Nugent would have a good performance and was ready for that moment, he absolutely would have played. And you have to take into consideration when you put a player on the field, are they going to hurt themselves? As far as, are they going to put bad reps? Is that going to hurt their psyche? Is it going to hurt the team? Is it going to, make it more difficult for the players around? Or heaven forbid you get a player injured at the end of the season. And I get it. We want to see Drake Nugent because everyone wants the questions answered. They either want Drake Nugent to be better than Jake Brendel, or they want him to be figured out that he's, a lot like Jason Poe, and he just never really worked out. I think the 49ers felt pretty comfortable with Ben Barch and Nick Zakellis, the backup centers, and Drake Nugent was just down on the depth chart. I don't think he's somebody that you give up on. I think he's going to have an opportunity in training camp. We'll see a lot more of him during the preseason, and we'll see what happens. But I think he's still pretty far behind Nick Zakelj. Nick Zakel's a phenomenal pass blocker, but he also 6'6", 315 pounds with long arms. So he's built differently than Nugent. Where Nugent's going to be good is when it comes to the mental part of it. He's played center for a long time, has the ability. So, yeah, we're not really talking about Drake Nugent when we're talking about, guys that could possibly play center or, work into a potential starting role. I think he's going to have to go prove it. And there's a lot of things going against him right now. I think he's going to have the opportunity to do it, but, we'll see. Now, if you're going to be playing fantasy for the big game, you've got to use Underdog. Underdog Fantasy is so fun. They have their higher lower game. That's what I've been playing all throughout the playoffs, and it's made the game so much more enjoyable. And right now, Underdog Fantasy has a opportunity to do this pack, and it's got Patrick Mahomes, Xavier Worthy, Devontae Smith, in it. And all you have to do is play the pack, and you can win up to 4.5 times, what you are playing in the game. So it's a good chance to win, and it's a good opportunity. All you have to do is go into the description section and click the link for Underdog. And then when you get there, you download the app, you sign up, and you put the promo code Niners. When you do that, you have a chance to get 1,000 bonus cash and a free pick. So description section Niners for Underdog. And next week I'll put up my picks of what I think, as far as what I'm playing on Underdog, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope you guys will join it with the promo code Niners. Well, let's get on to the next question, and it's an interesting one, because I have a feeling that by the time the 49ers are up at 11, Will Johnson will be the clear best player available. Now, I wonder if that were to happen, should the 49ers draft him? Would they do that with the intention of shifting Green to play hybrid free safety nickel role? Another option might be to trade back, or should they just make a bit of a reach for a greater position of need? So it's a lot. This is Brandon West that brings the question. There's a lot to this with a lot of different layers. But I will say this. Will Johnson is a heck of a football player. There is a lot to like about Will Johnson, but he also missed games because of injury. So I think that there's going to be a lot of people that have Will Johnson number one on their board. He's a guy that can lock it down. He's a guy that can make a lot of plays. Very, very talented guy. So I think in that regard, there's an opportunity. Everyone likes the fact that he's 6'2", over 200 pounds, but he's got that, blend of size and fluidity. We have not seen the 49ers take a cornerback ahead of the third round until Renardo Green, and they took him with the last pick of the second round. And, Will Johnson at 11, I don't think the 49ers are going to be willing to take a cornerback there. I think your thought process on moving back would probably be what the 49ers do. I'm sure there might be somebody willing to come up to get him, depending on how the draft is shaking out. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, just take him. You need a third corner anyways. You talked about Renardo Green. He could play nickel. You could play Diamond Lenore at nickel, and you could get that lockdown corner that really the 49ers haven't had a pure lockdown corner since probably Deion Sanders. And, they're hard to come by. So if you could find a guy, and I get the reasoning and thought process, you could get a guy that's going to be around, for the next 5 years at least, your Sauce Gardner type guy, right? Robert Saleh has been willing to draft a cornerback high. You got to think that that's going to have lasting positive ramifications for your football team. So I don't think it's going to be corner. And, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people when there's some really good names on the board at 11 and the 49ers don't go that direction. And so I think you're right in your thought process of, the 49ers probably won't go there, even though he's the clear best player available. And, the 49ers don't draft BPA. They just don't. They like to draft the best player that fits positional need. And so we'll see what the positional needs are. Normally when the 49ers draft high like this, except for 2021, they like to go with a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman. They went Mike McGlinchey, but in 2018, I still think they want to go defensive line. And I think defensive line might be the pick, but Will Johnson would be very hard to pass up. I think that was a good possibility. And I think you could be right. And the 49ers might think about trading back if, they have the opportunity to do so. David Marazzo had asked me about Wyatt Millam, offensive tackle from West Virginia. And he told me to go check out his tape from versus Abdul Carter. And so I wanted to bring him up because I think Millam is an interesting guy, especially now, because if you guys haven't heard, when he went to the Senior Bowl and they got his measurements, it wasn't really what everyone was hoping his measurements were going to be. They looked at him and they thought, this guy was a potential tackle. And then he goes out and he has 32-inch arms. And I think that really changed some things. People changed their mind on who Wyatt Millam is. But I will say this. He's a very talented football player, and he's almost a carbon copy of McGlinchey minus arm length. 6'6", 317 pounds, comes out of West Virginia, right? I mean, he was a transfer in, but I mean, the guy just fits the bill as far as that goes. He's got 10 and 2/8-inch hands. He's probably going to move pretty quickly. He fits the scheme, but the 32 and 5/8-inch arms are what's going to hold him back. He's no longer a tackle in the NFL, even though he played really good in that game against Abdul Carter. He did a fantastic job. I do believe that he's going to be a guard in the NFL. I thought his Senior Bowl one-on-ones, from what I've seen, I've got to take a deep dive. I'm going to try to do that, sometime this weekend. I thought it went really good, considering he's switching to a new position and playing guard. I thought he did pretty well. He's got a good skill set. I think he could develop into a very good guard in the league. So yeah, I love the film against Abdul Carter. I think if his arms would have been 33, whatever, I think the 49ers would have viewed him as a tackle. They are one of the teams that doesn't care about arm length as much. But I do think he's a good player. I think right now, my early on projections, I think he's a second round pick. So if the 49ers went defensive line in round 1, they could easily go to a Wyatt Millam in round 2 and potentially lock in a guard that could step in and play left guard. So you got a guy that can play left guard initially, opposite of Pooney. Pooney was also a tackle. So good football player. I like the size. I think that the 49ers are going to be, pretty happy about him. But now that he's went to the Senior Bowl and measured, I do believe he is for sure going to be moving inside and not going to be playing tackle. But I appreciate David putting me onto Wyatt Millam because that was a fun watch for sure. A 49ers fan says, what I'd like to know is your picks in the first 4 rounds of the draft. Can you do a video on that subject? Remember, 49ers have 2 picks in the 3rd round. So I'm not ready to put out the names that I think the 49ers are going to pick in the draft. I think it's way too early for that. I haven't even done like a mock draft. I know everyone does mock drafts, and I enjoy watching them, but I think that there's a lot that has to happen. And I'll probably do a mock draft here or there. We'll see. But there's a lot of information that can still be gathered from the combine that's going to help slate these guys. Senior Bowl was the first domino to drop, and then it'll be the combine. That'll give everyone a lot of information because then the teams will have a really good feeling on who these players are, and the numbers will just match what you see on the film. For some, it just confirms. Now, for somebody like me, I'm pretty bullish on what I see on film is what I go with. And really, I'm just thinking through the 49ers prism, and that's usually what they do. Measurables don't matter as much as film. And so I think true football guys are kind of like that. But what I will say this is that looking at the draft so far, it looks to me like picks 20 through 55 is going to be the best part of the draft. And so I'm starting to come to grips with the fact that trading back could be the best option for the 49ers. You might lose out on one of those offensive tackles, but I'm not convinced the 49ers are willing to go offensive tackle early. I think that there are some guys that are, once you get past probably the first two tackles, that are going to be available at the end of the first round, probably into the second round, that could step in and start day one. And we've seen the 49ers put positional value on other positions, and there's a premium in this draft on defensive line, defensive tackle, and edge rushers. I think the 49ers need to take an edge rusher and a defensive lineman in one of their first three picks. So picking either 11, 43, or 75. I think two of the three need to be defensive linemen, either edge rusher or D tackle, because of how good they are. That's initially. I don't know what I'll say, a month from now, 2 months from now, but that's my initial beliefs and thoughts. I do see a lot of really good players. We talked about safeties in this one. I think the 49ers need to walk away with a really talented safety. Umanwari, Akuba, those are guys that I really like in this draft. I think those guys would be guys the 49ers should probably prioritize. And then when you're talking about another position, I think the 49ers need to prioritize is I do think they need to strike on a cornerback. And so getting somebody that's going to be available in round 3 at pick 75, or even later on in 99, or being able to trade up from that position because you got the extra picks, there's some guys you probably need to get. And of course, we're going to see how high my guy goes. Azareye'h Thomas out of Florida State. I love the film. This has been one of my favorite guys. So I've been on him for a while, and I think he's going to probably push up into the front part of the second round, but you never know. It cools down. I'd love for the 49ers to be able to grab him. So I think positional need-wise, the 49ers need to get a couple defensive linemen. Probably a offensive lineman in round 2 would be my guess. And there's other defensive ends that you could grab off the edge that you could probably trade up from 75 up to get. Kind of like they did last year with Dominic Pooney, right? They took Renardo Green, then they traded up to get Dominic Pooney. Trade up and get Donovan Izaruko from Boston College. I really like him a lot. So I could see something like that happening. Also an Ashton Gillett. I think that he's a guy that can move inside and play on obvious pass downs inside. So there's a lot to like. So I think defensive tackle and defensive end are going to be addressed. And then I think you have to start addressing your safety and your cornerback room. That's what's going to be tough. Can you address all those in your first 4 picks? That's what I think the 49ers need to do in this draft. But it's not going to be easy. But thank you guys for all your questions. Like I said, keep bringing the questions on. I'm always curious to see what you guys have. And I'm interested in talking draft or free agency or whatever, or even just football scheme and everything. I love that as well. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. It means a lot. And this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.